You see, there comes a moment when the person who has poured out their love, their patience, and their presence realizes the truth they've been giving to someone who thrives on running. Someone who pulls away the second things get close. The empath, the one with the deepest well of love, finally stops. Not with drama, not with begging, not with another exhausting conversation. They stop with silence. That silence is not passive. It is powerful. It is a declaration that says, you will no longer feed on my giving while you hide from your own fear of intimacy. The avoidant, who once held the illusion of control, now faces the mirror of absence. They expect pursuit. They expect reconciliation. They expect the empath to keep extending the bridge. But when the bridge is burned, they are left on their lonely island with nothing but the echo of their pride. And here's the thing, no contact isn't revenge. It's restoration. It's the empath reclaiming their peace, their dignity, their value. It's a boundary written in ice, not fire. Because fire can be fought with fire. But ice is untouchable. It's calm, absolute, and it leaves no room for negotiation. That's the power. That's the moment the empath rises, not with noise, but with silence that speaks louder than any words ever could. Silence is one of the most underestimated forms of communication, yet when used with intention, it is also one of the most powerful. For the empath who has spent months or even years pouring energy into someone who keeps pulling away, silence becomes a radical act of self-respect. The empath is used to giving, to explaining, to making excuses for the avoidance behavior, and to stretching themselves thin in the hope that love will eventually soften the other person's walls. But the avoidant thrives on this dynamic. They feed off the assurance that no matter how many times they withdraw, the empath will come running back with love, validation, and another attempt to bridge the gap. Silence disrupts this cycle in the most unexpected way. When the empath chooses no contact, it is not a moment of weakness, but a moment of reclaiming strength. It is the moment they decide that their words are no longer currency to be wasted on someone who refuses to listen. In silence, the empath is no longer chasing, convincing, or pleading. Instead, they communicate through absence. That absence is a message that cannot be misinterpreted. It says, I have given all that I can, and now I will protect myself. For the avoidant, who is used to being pursued, this silence is not simply quiet, it is deafening. It is the sound of control slipping from their hands. Silence carries weight because it refuses to play the game. Anger can be argued with, accusations can be deflected, tears can be dismissed, but silence leaves nothing to grasp. It leaves the avoidant staring into the void they created. For perhaps the first time, they feel what it is like when the person who always gave, who always tried, who always extended compassion is no longer available. This absence stings not because the empath is trying to punish them, but because the avoidant must confront the reality that someone who once loved them deeply has chosen peace over proximity. The power of silence also lies in its calmness. Silence does not need to shout its worth. It does not need to justify itself. It simply exists steady and unshaken. That calmness can be more destabilizing than any confrontation because it communicates a truth the avoidant does not want to face. The empath no longer needs them. For someone who has built their pride on pushing others away while secretly expecting them to return, the realization that the empath will not return is a shattering blow. For the empath, choosing silence is not about coldness. It is about clarity. It is about finally understanding that their energy is precious, that their love is valuable, and that giving endlessly to someone who runs is not strength but self-sacrifice. By choosing silence, they communicate their worth more loudly than any words ever could. They no longer ask to be chosen. They choose themselves. In the stillness of no contact, the empath's presence becomes more powerful in absence than it ever was in pursuit. There comes a time when the empath finally sees the loop for what it is, a cycle that endlessly repeats itself without resolution. The avoidant creates distance the moment intimacy feels too close. The empath responds with reassurance, love, and pursuit, and the cycle begins again. The avoidant finds comfort in knowing that no matter how far they pull back, someone will always step forward to close the gap. But the moment the empath decides to stop, the pattern collapses. Breaking the cycle isn't about proving a point. It's about reclaiming sanity and energy from a dynamic that was never balanced to begin with. The avoidant has learned to thrive in this imbalance. They depend on the empath's giving nature to keep the connection alive, even as they sabotage the closeness that connection demands. The empath's constant pursuit inadvertently validates the avoidant's belief that they can retreat without consequence, that love will always be waiting when they decide to reappear. It's a dance of push and pull, with one partner always taking the steps forward and the other retreating into the shadows. But when the empath refuses to keep dancing, the avoidant is left alone with no one to match their movements. That stillness exposes the emptiness of the entire pattern. The empath's decision to withdraw from the cycle is not born out of cruelty, but out of exhaustion and awakening. They begin to realize that every attempt to chase is really an attempt to convince the avoidant of something the avoidant has no desire to face. That realization creates a quiet power. By stepping away, the empath shows that love should not require constant pursuit, constant negotiation, or constant justification. Love that must always be chased is not love, it is dependency dressed as connection. And by no longer chasing, the empath signals that they will no longer participate in a relationship that feeds one person's fear while draining the other's strength. For the avoidant, this sudden lack of pursuit is more than confusing, it is destabilizing. They are accustomed to being the one in control, dictating the tempo of closeness and distance. The empath's choice to step back removes that control entirely. The avoidant may try to provoke, may test to see if the empath will resume the chase, but when the cycle remains broken, they face the one thing they fear most: intimacy with themselves. No more distractions, no more reassurance, no more escape routes provided by someone else's love. Just silence, absence, and the awareness that the person who once carried the relationship is no longer willing to carry it alone. When the empath goes no contact, something profound happens that the avoidant never anticipates. They are forced to face themselves. For so long, the avoidant has survived by relying on the empath's steady presence to cushion the impact of their withdrawal. Every time they ran, they knew there would be someone waiting to close the gap, to reassure them, to ease the loneliness that comes with pushing love away. But silence changes everything. Silence removes the buffer. It holds up a mirror to the avoidant's choices and strips away the illusion that they are in control. What once felt like strength, distancing, detachment, emotional unavailability, now begins to feel like emptiness. The mirror effect of no contact works because the empath refuses to play their old role. In the past, when the avoidant pulled away, the empath filled the silence with words, explanations, and acts of love that softened the sting of absence. But when the empath chooses ice, cold silence, the avoidant no longer has that soft landing. They are left with the very void they tried to create, and in that void, their pride begins to crack. Pride had always told them that the empath would never leave, that the empath's love was unconditional to the point of self-abandonment. Pride told them they could retreat again and again without consequence. But absence proves pride wrong. The avoidant begins to experience the discomfort of their own patterns without the distraction of someone else trying to fix it. No contact denies them the validation they once relied on. When they send no message and no reply comes back, when they create distance and no one closes it, they begin to feel the weight of isolation they constructed for themselves. It is no longer an empowered choice, it is a lonely reality. The empath's silence becomes a mirror reflecting back the avoidant's fears, fear of intimacy, fear of vulnerability, fear of being truly seen. And without the empath's pursuit to cover those fears, the avoidant is left exposed to them. What makes this mirror so powerful is that it is unarguable. Words can be twisted, tears can be dismissed, anger can be minimized, but silence cannot be debated. It offers no excuses, no rationalizations, no distractions. It simply reveals the truth of the dynamic. The avoidant, who once believed their distance was a shield, begins to recognize it as a cage. That recognition, though painful, is the first time they truly see what their behavior costs, not only to the empath, but to themselves. And while this realization may bruise their pride, it is often the only way for growth to begin. Because in the absence of pursuit, the avoidant has to confront what they have always avoided: the reality that love requires reciprocity, closeness requires courage, and pushing people away ultimately leaves them with nothing but the reflection of their own fears staring back at them. When the empath chooses no contact, it is often misunderstood as an act of retaliation, a way of teaching the avoidant a lesson or punishing them for their behavior. But that is far from the truth. No contact is not driven by revenge. It is driven by self-preservation. It is the empath recognizing that staying in the dynamic means endlessly giving while receiving little in return, and that such a pattern slowly erodes their sense of self. By stepping back, they are not striking back, they are choosing to heal. They are reclaiming the time, energy, and peace that were being consumed by trying to love someone who would not meet them halfway. The distinction is important. Revenge seeks to harm, but restoration seeks to rebuild what was broken within. The empath's silence is not about making the avoidant suffer, it is about ending their own suffering. For so long, the empath has put their well-being second, convincing themselves that if they just love harder, wait longer, or explain more clearly, the avoidant will finally let down their guard. But when those efforts only meet more distance, the empath begins to see that the only way forward is inward. No contact becomes a doorway to restoration, a way of nurturing the self that has been neglected. Restoration also means returning to balance. The empath's love has often tilted the relationship so far in the avoidant's favor that they forget what equality even feels like. No contact resets the scales. It places the empath back at the center of their own life, reminding them that their value does not depend on being chosen, but on choosing themselves. That act alone restores dignity. It reminds them that love should feel safe, mutual, and reciprocal, not like a battle where one person keeps running and the other keeps chasing. For the avoidant, this is disorienting. They may expect anger, confrontation, or pleading, but what they receive instead is quiet detachment. That quietness is powerful because it leaves no room for negotiation. It is not an invitation to argue or manipulate. It is simply a closed door, firm and calm. And though it may wound the avoidant's pride, it is not an attack. It is the empath living the truth that their peace matters more than another endless cycle of hurt. In this way, no contact transforms from what looks like rejection into something far deeper. Restoration of self-worth, restoration of boundaries, and restoration of inner calm. The empath does not need revenge because the act of reclaiming their wholeness is victory enough. There is something uniquely powerful about calm detachment. Anger can be matched with anger, shouting can be countered with silence, and tears can be ignored, but ice, true, steady, unshaken ice, leaves nothing for the avoidant to push against. That is why the empath's choice of cold, clear no contact carries such weight. It does not feed the drama, it does not spark conflict, and it does not give the avoidant the satisfaction of thinking they still hold control. Instead, it establishes a boundary so absolute that it cannot be negotiated. Ice is unyielding, and in that unyielding calm, the avoidant's pride begins to wither. Avoidants often rely on emotional reactions to reassure themselves of their importance. When the empath cries, begs, or argues, it reassures the avoidant that they still have influence, that their distance still matters, that they are still central to the other person's emotional world. Even negative emotions can be fuel for their pride because it proves the bond has not been severed. But when the empath responds with nothing but cool silence, there is no fuel left to burn. The avoidant finds themselves staring into a void where validation used to be. Their usual strategies, retreat, provoke, withdraw, return, suddenly collapse because the other side of the game refuses to play. Ice carries another message to self-possession. When the empath no longer reacts, it communicates a level of inner strength that the avoidant did not expect. Instead of desperation, there is composure. Instead of pleading, there is peace. This calm detachment unsettles the avoidant because it reveals that the empath no longer needs them, not even for closure. Pride feeds on the belief that someone will always come back. Ice denies that belief completely. It does not slam the door in anger, it closes it softly and locks it without a word. That subtlety is devastating because it communicates finality without ever having to announce it. For the empath, this icy no contact is not cruelty, it is clarity. It is the realization that their worth is not proven through endurance or sacrifice, but through the boundaries they set. By choosing calm detachment, they stop giving the avoidant opportunities to manipulate or test them. The coldness is not about punishing the other. It is about protecting themselves. In that protection, they finally create space for healing, growth, and relationships that can meet them with the warmth they've always given so freely. The avoidant's pride, however, cannot withstand that kind of absence. Pride tells them that they are too important to be walked away from, too guarded to ever be abandoned. Yet the empath's icy silence proves otherwise. What destroys the avoidant's pride is not a dramatic exit, but the quiet, steady refusal to re-engage. It is the absence of emotion where there used to be abundance, the calm where there used to be chaos. That is the true devastation, not fire, but ice, leaving nothing to fight against and nothing to hold on to. And so what begins as silence becomes transformation. The empath who once gave endlessly finally discovers that true strength is not found in chasing, but in stepping back. The ice-cold boundary of no contact is not an act of punishment, but of power, power to reclaim dignity, restore peace, and break free from cycles that drain the soul. For the avoidant, this silence is a mirror and a reckoning. For the empath, it is liberation. Remember, the strongest statement you will ever make is not in the words you speak, but in the boundaries you hold. Your silence does not mean defeat. It means you've chosen yourself, and in doing so, you've chosen freedom. Thank you for giving me your time, your attention, and your energy today. May you walk forward with clarity, with courage, and with the unshakable knowledge that your worth has never depended on someone else's ability to see it. It has always been yours. Thank you, and goodbye.